Bom dia a todas e a todos. Vamos começar o nosso seminário, o nosso evento Direito, Políticas Públicas e Internet. O meu nome é Diogo Coutinho, eu sou professor aqui da Faculdade de Direito, do Departamento de Direito Econômico, Financeiro e Tributário. É um prazer tê-los aqui. Obrigado pela presença desde logo. Nós estamos agora prestes a começar essa programação intensa de um dia, são 4 mesas. O meu colega aqui, professor Denis Antoniali, vai explicar brevemente como essas mesas foram organizadas e dar uma justificativa, uma fundamentação sobre qual foi o objetivo e o escopo do modo como a gente estruturou e pensou esse seminário. Mas eu queria brevemente dizer que esse é um evento organizado em parceria pelo Núcleo Internet, Direito e Sociedade dessa faculdade e pelo Grupo de Direito e Políticas Públicas também aqui do Largo São Francisco. A gente resolveu dessa vez agir em conjunto para propiciar a ocasião na qual a gente pudesse discutir as relações entre a internet, as políticas públicas que a utilizam como meio, como ferramenta, e o direito, entendendo que esse é um debate necessário, auspicioso, bem-vindo, e mais do que tudo um debate que precisa ser feito como uma forma de discutir como as políticas públicas podem ser aperfeiçoadas, como elas podem ser melhoradas e qual é o papel das ferramentas que a internet oferece para tanto. Então, muito rapidamente, eu só queria dar as boas-vindas a todas e todos. Eu vou passar a palavra para o meu colega Denis, para que ele também possa explicar algo sobre o modo como nós estruturamos essas mesas, e em seguida a gente vai propriamente para a primeira delas, que no fundo é a apresentação de um vídeo contextualizador, como será explicado logo em seguida.
Bom dia a todas e a todos também, bem-vindos. É um prazer receber todo mundo aqui para prestigiar esse evento que a gente tem pensado já há algum tempo, que acho que vai ser muito interessante. Meu nome é Denis Antoniali, eu sou professor contratado aqui da faculdade, do Departamento de Direito de Estado, professor de Constitucional, e desde 2012 coordeno o Núcleo de Direito, Internet e Sociedade, que em parceria com o Grupo Direito e Políticas Públicas organiza esse evento. O Núcleo de Direito, Internet e Sociedade é supervisionado pelo professor Vigílio Afonso da Silva, também aqui da casa, e tem servido como espaço de formação e interlocução sobre questões de políticas de internet a partir da visão do direito. E acho que isso explica, de certa forma, o motivo ou o que a gente queria, as discussões que a gente queria promover com esse evento, que tentam ligar esses campos do conhecimento. Então, o campo que pensa a internet, o campo do direito e o campo das políticas públicas. E aí, eu acho que a gente tinha um desafio bastante grande, porque muitas questões estão dentro desse espectro, né? E a gente tinha que fazer, de alguma forma, uma seleção ou escolher quais seriam as discussões que a gente achava mais relevantes para promover ao longo desse dia. E a nossa escolha foi por seguir essa divisão didática que olha para a internet a partir de diferentes camadas. Então, a camada da infraestrutura, a camada do código e a camada do conteúdo. E colocar, então, dentro da discussão, pensando nessas camadas, quais eram os principais temas que a gente achava que poderiam suscitar o debate. Para isso, então, a gente pensou 3 mesas que olhavam para essas camadas. Por que a gente pensou na estruturação desse evento a partir dessas camadas? A gente achou que seria interessante fazer uma introdução sobre o que elas são e uma perspectiva crítica, e aí a gente vai ter a apresentação de um vídeo do professor Oliver Sylvain, e a Lilian também vai se debruçar um pouco sobre esse tema e nos ajudar a entender como é que esses painéis foram estruturados. E a gente decidiu encerrar, depois desses 3 painéis que olham especificamente para as camadas, com um painel sobre concorrência, também aí pensada como política pública, e questões da internet, das plataformas, para fechar esse evento, mais uma perspectiva de governança e de quem controla a internet, né, quem manda na internet. Por serem 4 mesas e a gente ter pensado em um evento bastante intenso e completo, a gente vai tentar ser bastante estrito com o tempo, para não atrasar muito, em respeito aos palestrantes também, que estão dedicando o tempo deles a vir até aqui, não gerar muito atraso, e a todo mundo que está aqui também presente, prestigiando o evento, para que tudo siga o cronograma. Então, sejam pacientes com os moderadores, porque nós estamos todos instruídos a sermos um pouco rigorosos com o tempo. Mas acho que todos nós vamos fazer o esforço para deixar o máximo de tempo possível para o debate e para as colocações de todo mundo. Dito isso, eu acho que a nossa função era mais de dar as boas-vindas aqui, de abrir o evento, e agora passo a palavra para a Lilian, que vai falar um pouco mais sobre essa divisão das camadas da internet e sobre o vídeo que a gente vai apresentar aqui. Então, obrigado, bom evento para todo mundo.
Obrigada. Bom dia a todas e a todos. Muito obrigada pela presença de vocês. Meu nome é Lilian Sintra de Mello, eu sou doutoranda daqui da Faculdade de Direito. E, primeiramente, eu gostaria de agradecer aos professores Diogo Coutinho e Denis Antoniali e aos demais membros do Grupo de Direitos e Políticas Públicas e do Núcleo de Direito, Internet e Sociedade, que foram grupos que eu vi nascer aqui dentro da faculdade, pelo convite honroso para participar e colaborar com o evento de hoje. Com enorme satisfação e prazer que vivencio esse momento ao lado de vocês. E hoje a gente está aqui para entender um pouco melhor o que as camadas da internet têm a ver com direito e políticas públicas. No início dos anos 2000, o criador da internet, o Tim Berners-Lee, em seu livro Within the Web, indicou 4 camadas de arquitetura da internet. E foi a primeira vez que a gente começou a discutir isso numa perspectiva mais didática, para tentar entender melhor o que estava acontecendo nesse novo fenômeno aí que era a internet, no começo dos anos 2000. Então, tínhamos transmissão, computação, software e conteúdo. E essa é considerada, na verdade, uma versão simplificada do modelo Open System Interconnection, da Organização Internacional de Normalização, da ISO, que é comumente utilizada por engenheiros, mas não é para se assustar porque é coisa de engenheiro. Ela existe para facilitar a compreensão da internet. Só que esse modelo da OSI, na verdade, tem 7 camadas. Então, é uma simplificação. Ainda que esses 2 modelos se concentrem em aspectos funcionais da rede, é possível afirmar que seus elementos também poderiam ser facilmente adaptados para ilustrar os desafios que são enfrentados na elaboração e na implementação de políticas públicas da internet. Então, hoje, a adaptação mais reconhecida foi elaborada pelo professor Yochai Benkler, de Harvard, num artigo chamado From Consumers to Users, que descreve a internet em 3 camadas, que é essa divisão que a gente está usando aqui no evento, que é infraestrutura, código e conteúdo. Além disso, o professor Benkler foi além e trouxe esse conceito para a discussão de governança da internet. A primeira camada, que a gente chama de infraestrutura, tem também traz principalmente a questão de como a informação trafega. A camada lógica controla a infraestrutura, do ponto de vista do professor Benkler. E a camada de conteúdo é a que contém as informações e os materiais que transitam na internet. Isso é importante para a gente tentar entender melhor depois um pouco a dinâmica de poder que existe aí dentro. Então, logo na sequência, o professor Lawrence Lessig publicou o seu famoso livro The Futures of Ideas, e rebatizou essas 3 camadas, e ficou somente camada física, camada de código e camada de conteúdo. E introduziu a discussão sobre a arquitetura da rede como um fator de regulação social. E aí surgiu a famosa frase Code is Law. E a gente começou a discutir um pouco mais quais são as dinâmicas de poder que existem dentro dessas 3 camadas. Muitos autores foram inspirados pela ideia de que o direito e a internet sofrem influências recíprocas de modo que tanto a lei responde aos avanços tecnológicos, como também molda e pode influenciar o seu design. Foi no trabalho de Tim Wu, o pai do conceito de neutralidade da rede, que adicionamos a ideia de código como uma ferramenta, na verdade, antirregulatória, que pode ser usada por determinados grupos de interesse. Mais para frente a gente vai abordar esse conceito de neutralidade da rede e tentar entender melhor como que a internet pode ser usada por esses grupos de interesse, né? No vídeo do professor Oliver Sylvain, ele vai abordar isso um pouco melhor. Então, nos últimos anos, diversos autores tentaram adaptar esses modelos com o objetivo de identificar mais facilmente os desafios a serem enfrentados no campo das políticas públicas de internet. No entanto, raros são os estudos que apresentam esses arranjos de forma sistemática. Nesse contexto, há mais ou menos 2 anos, em complemento às minhas pesquisas do doutorado, assisti a uma palestra que mudou minha percepção sobre o papel do direito na elaboração de políticas públicas na internet. Desde então, acompanho esse nome aonde quer que eu vá, sempre tentando prestar atenção no que ele está publicando. E esse palestrante é o professor Oliver Sylvain, hoje o keynote speaker. Gostaria muito brevemente de apresentar o professor Sylvain. Ele leciona na Faculdade de Direito da Universidade de Fordham, em Nova York, e é membro do Centro de Direito e Política da Informação e do Centro de Raça, Direito e Justiça. Entre suas principais publicações, temos os textos Broadband Localism, Network Equality, que na minha opinião é o mais brilhante de todos, e Intermediary Design Duties, o qual tive o privilégio, junto com Beatriz, de discutir presencialmente com o professor Sylvain na conferência da Law and Society Association em junho desse ano no México. A participação do professor Sylvain no evento de hoje será por meio de um vídeo, previamente gravado e gentilmente legendado pelos membros do Internet Lab. Em sua apresentação, o professor Sylvain traz conceitos da arquitetura da internet, a divisão em camadas, e, na sequência, apresenta alguns desafios de políticas públicas, agendas de pesquisa e o que a gente pode prestar atenção em cada uma dessas camadas. Essa será uma excelente introdução para as próximas mesas do dia, cujas temáticas foram divididas de acordo com camadas, considerando não só os arranjos técnicos da arquitetura da internet, como também os arranjos de poder. Espero que vocês gostem da apresentação do professor Sylvain. Obrigada.
Hello, my name is Oliver Sylvain. I am an associate professor of law at Fordham Law School in New York City. Beatrice and others at the University of Sao Paulo Law School, the Center for Law, Internet and Society Studies, and the Law and Public Policy Initiative have generously invited me to give a keynote on Internet architecture and law for the Conference on Law, Public Policy, and the Internet. It's my great pleasure to do so. I have to say I'm disappointed that I can't meet you in person. I hope at some point we can do this in the future. And if we do, I'll be sure to practice my Portuguese. I'm going to start, because I only have up to 20 minutes, I suspect I may run long, to talk about the history that's brought us here, because that explains a lot of why and how we think of Internet architecture in the way we do today. We are no longer in a world where the idea of interacting with others online, say through video streaming, if you might imagine in the Jetson eras of the late 60s and 70s, is fantasy or science fiction. It's sort of thing now that our children are very adept at, and indeed many of them are probably more sophisticated than most of us are actually in interacting at least with user-facing applications and services. But how did we get here? When Beatrice asked me to talk about infrastructure logical and content layers, the first thing I thought of was what is in engineering circles called the layered stack. Now, I don't mean to call or invoke engineering to scare you. This is really one helpful mapping of the way in which we might think of the different aspects, the layers of the networked architecture. At the bottom rests what we might call infrastructure, that is the hardwire and electromagnetic spectrum infrastructure that enables transmission. On top of that are the protocols and logic that really distinguishes the internet from other communication technologies, and then content and applications at the top, the user-facing services that with which most of us are familiar. And when I talk about content applications, I think generally people are pretty adept at understanding what that entails. These are some of the most well-known and popular, to be sure. But I also mean to talk about a range of others that, while also content and applications related, also pretty embedded in our physical space. I'll talk about this in a second. The second layer worth identifying, just as an introductory matter, is a logical layer. As I say, this is the layer that explains how, really enables the way in which a message gets from point A to point B. The science and computer engineering involved is really remarkable, but at this point decades old, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And then finally the infrastructure layer, which, as a person who's been trained in communications and telecommunications policy, I tend to think is extremely important. But of course, it's just one slice of this layered stack. This is the physical, as I say, the physical infrastructure, the physical elements that make the delivery of content and applications possible at the end of the network. All right, so this is our layered stack. Again, what engineers talk about is a far more complicated thing. What I've offered you is a simplified, kind of policy-friendly way of thinking about the architecture of the internet. Engineers often identify several layers in between the application and physical layer that, or the infrastructure layer, that help to enable the transport of internet communications. And I will say a word about that in a moment. Content and applications, again, these are various, but as I said, as I hinted at, these are not solely located in the online space. They have salience for the physical space. Airbnb, of course, is more or less an online broker that enables and facilitates interactions between end users for use of a material, lived physical service. We might also think of Fitbit, and the wearable technologies operate really as app content and applications, but are so lived in the physical space that we often think of them as part of the architecture. But to be clear, this is what we might mean when we talk about content and applications. Now, the transmission layer has a really remarkable story, an account that begins with the Defense Department in the United States research entity, DARPA, investment, or really request for research and proposal to engineers to develop a resilient and redundant communication platform that can protect the intelligence of the Defense Department from an enemy attack. And one of the ways in which engineers responded, these folks would later become associated with the IETF, the Internet Engineering Task Force, is to develop an infrastructure that is distributed, a distributed network. that would allow interoperable connections between networks. That is to say, one network based at the University of San Francisco or at Stanford or at MIT could interconnect with each other through this distributed network, and thus the term internetworking. IETF is most associated with the transmission control protocol, the internet protocol that this early research in the 60s developed into. That is, these are engineering standards that are consensus generated. That is, engineers come together in a non-governmental standard setting agenda to identify the best ways to ensure the operation of a distributed network. The logic here is, as I said, pretty remarkable. The idea is, in a nutshell, is that the originating message is disaggregated into packets and is conveyed through the network through a regime of packet switching. That is, these digital packets are disaggregated and sent through the network, and all are headed with an address and reassembled at the destination. This is consistent with the Defense Department's early ambition to create a distributed network that finds the intelligence of the network at the edges of the network, not at some central warehouse or central Pentagon department that would hold the intelligence of the network. When I say intelligence, I mean the data inputs, the creativity that comprises any bit of secure and important information. This data is circulated through the network in a distributed fashion, in ways that can never be captured by one central operator. So there are a couple key design norms that I want to draw out from this, and then we'll continue to more law and policy aspects. And first is that the IETF, in developing these standards, wanted to ensure interoperability between networks. That is, in order for networks to communicate each other, they must be able to speak the same language. And part of what the TCP/IP does, the Transmission Control Protocol and Internet Protocol do, is ensure that end user empowerment is the notion, again, that the intelligence of the networks, the data, the valuable data that is meant to be shared is not warehoused in one central location, but that is resting at the ends of the network with users. This is a decentralized network, again, consistent with the point I just made. And key here is a sense of modularity, is the idea of modularity as an engineering concept. And this is where our layered stack matters as well. Each aspect, each layer is meant to accomplish something and can accomplish it with or without the operation of the other layers. This, again, is to ensure resiliency. ICANN is one of the more well-known elements or entities or governance organizations responsible for this transmission logic. They are the Internet Corporation of Addressing, Name, and Numbers, responsible for developing protocols, again, non-governmental standard-setting organization developing protocols for addressing to ensure that there isn't conflict and inconsistency. So the modular layered stack has at its center really the distinction, the thing that sets it apart from other communication technologies, is the transmission logic. But infrastructure is vital too, and infrastructure has a far longer vintage. We can talk about the semaphores of centuries ago, or even smoke signals, the electromagnetic spectrum that enables communication, wireless communication, radio, broadcasting. Of course, telephone communications consist of infrastructure, and television video distribution. Cable television is also comprised of a physical infrastructure. Question for us is, what about broadband, right? Well, often associated with the term the last mile, that is the last mile of infrastructure to the home. What is broadband? How should it be treated as a matter of law and policy? Is it more like telephony in that it is an international network of cables and wires that have a variety of norms associated with their governance? Or is it more like the electromagnetic spectrum that is contingent on the administration of scarce frequencies? This is the problem that has been resolved over the past couple of decades around the world in different jurisdictions. But the key here is that, and you'll forgive me for a movie reference, that so much of how we think about how to govern broadband and what broadband law and policy ought to look like is a function of what has happened in the past. And so you may find this familiar. This is still from Back to the Future. As with so much that's important, we do need to study what's happened in the past and understand how we've reached the point we are today. And for this, I'll be brief. Many of you may recognize that this is an early computer, right? IBM and other large data processing companies are distinctive by the 1960s in that they offer a service enables the automated processing of information and data in ways that humans are not capable of achieving. This is early computing, right? The development of the microprocessor really transforms this so that computing does not have to reside in the hands of a powerful data processor, but can be deployed in smaller devices, in personal computers, which is what we see at the late 1970s, early 1980s. It's not just personal computers, however, right? So to be clear, there are a variety of ways in which microprocessing technology enables a variety of ways of engaging in data processing, what we might now call computing, or what we call in the United States also under as a regulatory matter, information services, that enable users at the end of the network, right, to engage in data processing, ways that would not be possible at a time when data processing was a centralized venture. And so there's a key lesson here, right? In the United States, at least, it becomes a clear distinction between data processing on the one hand, computing, information service, and transmission at the bottom layer. Transmission, while certainly enabled through computing, is separate and apart in this early conception from the work that's engaged in computing at the ends of the network. This is a convention really that becomes embodied in regulation and law, sufficient to develop what we now understand called a concept called network neutrality or the open internet. That is that the infrastructure layer, the layer that enables the transmission of data from one location to the other, should be structurally separate from the operations of data processing at the top. And what you've clearly seen me do here is track the layered stack arrangement, where at the bottom you have infrastructure, that is a transmission layer, and at the top you have the applications and content layer, that is the layer in which data processing is happening. There is a theory and logic for why we aspire to have an open internet. So to be clear, this is a conception that is born from the ITF's development of standards, but it becomes embodied in law and is articulated in a variety of ways. So the legal reasoning that supports the separation between infrastructure and content at the top varies from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. But one theory, the prevailing theory, is that you want an open platform for applications and services so that entrepreneurs feel comfortable to develop new applications and services which bring in users. And with greater user interest, service providers invest more in the deployment of infrastructure. And thus we have a virtuous cycle where increased openness ensures user interest, which ensures investment, which ensures continued development of applications and services. There's every reason to believe that this architecture is what has delivered the internet of today. The sense that innovation and entrepreneurship at the edges of the network, where the intelligence must reside, encourages the development and deployment of and innovation of the infrastructure itself. But this is really just an argument. So just to be clear, this is our mapping, right? Our infrastructure at the bottom, content and applications at the top. I've blocked out transmission, not because it's not important, but to underscore that the argument here is for a structural separation between infrastructure and content and applications on the other end. This has become complicated in our day and age because, in fact, so many of the applications and content that we consume at the edges of the network depend on the infrastructure. So you can imagine an infrastructure, a cable service or broadband service that is not very fast will not enable you to engage in viewing movies on Netflix. So there's a clear interaction between content on the one hand and infrastructure. And so there's been an argument on the other side, that is an argument that has asked to slow down on the implementation of open internet principles. It argues that in order for content applications to improve, they must be attentive to the different infrastructures that exist. That is to say that infrastructure developers, the cable broadband operators, the telecommunications companies should be in a position to innovate on content and applications and not worry about structural separation. Well, this is, as I say, an argument. There are a variety of ways of thinking about this. Netflix, for example, does not abide itself by open internet principles. It has developed communication networks, CDNs, that enable its delivery of service quicker to broadband providers in ways that, to put it in other terms, bypass the existing infrastructure, so that a Netflix stream will go faster than, say, an advertisement on your local retailer's website, or faster than email. This is because Netflix has recognized that there is a relationship between content and infrastructure. More controversially, and probably familiar to you all in Brazil, is Facebook's effort, originally called internet.org, but Free Basics, that would provide a suite of applications that would be free to users through a mobile device, but and that is to say would not count towards the data caps, and would compete with other applications. This, by many accounts, violates principles of network neutrality to the extent there is a preference for certain applications on the basis of the infrastructure that is in place. And so let me identify some of the key norms that argue for or against the operation of Free Basics or operation of mingling between applications and infrastructure. The argument is that there should be no blocking of content, unaffiliated content, as it suggests anti-competitive behavior. Another is to ensure transparency in the operation of the network. That is, network management principles, network broadband management principles should be transparent to users so that they know that certain applications are slowed or blocked on any given time. And that there be a non-discrimination principle, that you not discriminate between different applications just by virtue of your position as an operator of infrastructure. All right. I know that many of you are familiar with this. This is some of the ideas embedded in the Marco Civil da Internet in Brazil. We have similar implementations of rule in the United States. One final point I'd make on this discussion of infrastructure is that, in my mind, there are some key norms that no matter which jurisdiction you're in, you attend to. That is, whether you're in Brazil or the United States or any country in Europe or in sub-Saharan Africa, that whether you allow companies to, broadband providers to affect the content and applications that users have, that there be a focus on ensuring openness and transparency, of commitment to universality, that is to ensuring that all people have access, and that to the extent they have access, it's equal access, right? And this suggests something about zero rating, that is something like free basics, where those who are given free phones do not have the full suite of applications and services available to everyone else. All right. In the interest of getting through this within time, I'm now going to transition to talking about applications and content governance. And to this, I mean, this is an important area only because this is the user-facing part of the architecture. But really, I mean, there's an argument that the internet has been as transformative as it's been because of the way in which it has democratized access to information. Indeed, this is not just a sociable and commercial transformation, but arguably a political one. There is a strong sense that in much of the Arab world, you may remember 6 years ago, discussions about political life and civic engagement were initiated online. This is an image of Tahrir Square, largely a creature of resistance, and largely many people think born from the delivery and free speech platforms enabled through open content applications. But really what's really important in our emergent political economy is the role of the intermediary, the online intermediary, the entity that makes connection between users possible. And I tell students in the United States when talking about intermediaries that really trying to understand what their obligations are to users, that is, what their role is in ensuring that there is an open platform for applications and content, really depends on what role you think an intermediary is. Is an intermediary more like a conduit, that is, a connector between application developers and users, or between users themselves? Or are they more like a platform or a megaphone that helps to distribute content in ways that wouldn't be possible, and that is indeed making the content and data more available than might otherwise be possible? I'm not ascribing to one way or another, one view or another here, just to identify that there are competing ways of thinking about intermediaries in the governance of applications and content. We might suspect that you don't want an extreme version of openness. That is, that intermediaries should not be simple conduits that enable whomever to speak whenever they want, for fear that some speakers, some companies, some users have a greater capacity, what one writer has called a communicative capacity, to share ideas and distribute ideas than others. Indeed, there's a good argument that a sense of a neutral platform might actually create great harm to those who do not have as much of a communicative capacity. That is to say, with one company's ability to speak, you create disadvantage for those who do not have the same capacity. The best way for me to think about, one way to think about this is a case of revenge porn and the abuse of vulnerable groups and historically subordinated groups on social media. Social media applications like Twitter or Reddit, even Facebook, for example, a few years ago, promised that they would not interfere in communications between users in the interest of end-user empowerment. What we've seen, though, is without a moderating force, without a role in actually governing and moderating speech, that there are potentials for harm to users. So all of the prominent applications for user-generated content have one way or another developed content guidelines that, as a matter of contract with their users, forbid abuse and harassment. And this is important to the extent it underscores that there is a role for governing content and applications, but that this does not originate with governments, that originates with the intermediaries themselves. Consistent with the interest in ensuring openness and a limited minimal government engagement, but on the other hand, attending to long-standing principles that ensure openness, universality, and equality. That is, that everyone feels comfortable engaging online, that they not feel potential for harassment, and that they all have the capacity to share ideas with each other. So this has been a quick rundown of what I suspect you appreciate is far more elaboration. Indeed, I teach a whole class that is 4 credits long in the United States called Information Law that takes up these concerns. At a minimum, though, I think what we draw from here is a sense that all of these elements of the emergent network communication economy be treated in different ways depending on their location in the architecture, whether they be infrastructure, logical, or content layers. It's been my pleasure to address you, even if it's been remotely. I hope at some point I get to meet you all in the future. Thank you.